Minnesota Lynx star Napheesa Collier led a moment of silence to honor George Floyd on the 5th anniversary of his death. And based off the reaction, you would have thought Fee and the Lynx did something far worse than, say, a police officer killing a man in the middle of a Minneapolis street by kneeling on his neck for 9 straight minutes.
And to make the league even less appealing, the Minnesota Lynx decided to hold in front of a mostly empty stadium a moment of silence for George Floyd. You remember him, the felon who died with a fatal level of fentanyl in his system and who had a long record of criminality and violence, including against women. Yes, the WNBA thought this was a good idea.
Instead of honoring the men and women who sacrificed their lives so I have the freedom to talk about this dump of a league, the WNBA decided to honor Jorge?
Can I get a moment of silence for the WNBA, who is no longer going to be with us because they are self-destructing?
Things sure have changed since that alleged racial reckoning that supposedly took place back in 2020. We had celebrities thinking they were freedom fighters because they posted black squares on Instagram, had Nancy Pelosi in Congress thinking they were members of the Dora Milaje, and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell out here cosplaying as a white abolitionist from the 1800s.
We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest.
In 2020, the entire world protested the horrific murder of George Floyd. And what was especially powerful was seeing so many in sports use their platform, their voices, and their resources to draw a line in the sand about dignity, decency, and humanity. But on this 5th anniversary, the Lynx largely stood alone in honoring Floyd. There was barely a mention of Floyd anywhere else in the sports world. Besides, it's not like this is the first time the Lynx found themselves willing to stand alone. In 2016, months before Colin Kaepernick took a knee, it was the Lynx led by superstar Maya Moore who spoke out after Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were murdered by police, causing the Minneapolis Police Department to walk off their post at their game. I was among those who knew that 2020 wasn't a movement. It was sadly only a moment when we briefly exceeded expectations. But it's easy to stand with black people and against white supremacy when it's a popular trend and there's some widespread agreement that what happened to Floyd was wrong, even though that isn't the case now. But the real separates from the fake when there is little support, and being in alignment with black empowerment and social justice lessens power, freezes opportunities, and loses political and social capital. It certainly didn't take 5 years for the script to be flipped, but this country is in the midst of one of its deepest embraces of white supremacy, starting with the current president, who most recently unapologetically spread the lie that there is white genocide taking place in South Africa in order to justify welcoming white South African quote-unquote refugees into the country with expedited paths to U.S. citizenship. Meanwhile, this administration is trying to end a program that revokes the legal status of over 500,000 migrants who are mostly from Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Gee, I wonder what the difference is. The sports world boldly took a stand 5 years ago. We literally went from this.
3 team members, Marcus Smart, Vincent Poirier, and Enes Kanter all came out to join peaceful protesters downtown in Boston yesterday. Kanter was seen at the State House wearing his Celtics jersey. He chanted, "I can't breathe," with the other protesters. Kanter also tweeted a video of himself speaking to a crowd saying, quote, "Be on the right side of history."
To partying with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. We also went from this.
It's been 10 days since George Floyd was brutally murdered.
How many times do we need to ask you to listen to your players?
What will it take
for one of us to be murdered by police brutality?
What if I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd?
What if I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd? If I was George Floyd?
I am George Floyd.
I am Breonna Taylor.
I am Ahmaud Arbery. I am Eric Garner.
I am McCormick Dunn.
I am Tamir Rice.
I am Trayvon Martin.
I am Walter Scott.
I am Michael Brown Jr.
I am Samuel Du Bois.
I am Frank Smart.
I'm Philip White.
I am Jordan Baker.
We will not be silenced.
We assert our right
to peacefully protest.
It shouldn't take this long to admit.
So, on behalf of the National Football League,
this is what we, the players,
would like to hear you state.
We, the National Football League,
condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people.
To this.
He's a handsome guy, but I wouldn't want to tackle him. Saquon Barkley. Where's Saquon?
Every turn of progress in this country has been met with backlash that is just as formidable. Jim Crow followed the end of slavery and Reconstruction. The Southern strategy, mass incarceration, and the war on drugs followed the civil rights movement. The MAGA movement formulated after the election of President Barack Obama. Eventually, there will be another moment when progress is popular. And when that happens, remember all of those who obeyed without being asked in this current moment. I'm Jemele Hill, and I approve this message.